talking about personal water, what we drink, what we put in a glass when we're thirsty. And I wrote a book called Bottle Mania that looks at the phenomenon of bottled water, how it came to go on sale, why we bought water, and some of the real differences between bottled water and tap water, and what it means that we now go through 40 billion plastic water bottles a year in this country. That's 1,000 bottles per second, every second of the day. I started to ask in the book if this was really necessary, and if it might even be, as some activists were saying, immoral. So what I learned was very complicated. This is really not a black and white issue, which is why I had to write a whole book about it. Water is a really local issue. Everyone's water is different, and many bottled waters are different also. But in general, because I don't have very much time, I'm just going to say that one of the biggest differences between bottled water and tap water is in how often the two are tested and who's doing the testing. The Environmental Protection Agency regulates our tap water, and the Food and Drug Administration administers bottled water as a food product. So they're tested, tap water is tested much more frequently. Another very important difference is that if you drink from a municipal water supply, the utility is required by law to send you every year a consumer confidence report. You have the right to know what they're testing for and what they found when they did their tests. And if anything goes wrong in between these annual reports, they're required to notify you immediately. The bottled water companies are under no such obligation to tell you the results of their tests. They don't have to report all their information to the FDA. Tap water is tested at the source and throughout the distribution system. The last time that bottled water is tested is at a bottled water plant. The water can sit in those bottles for up to 2 years before it's sold to you, and then it can sit around even longer while you're waiting to drink it. And while the FDA has said that the plastic used for these water bottles is perfectly safe for food products, they do stop short of saying that chemicals don't migrate into food or water from the plastic. And furthermore, all of their information on the plastics comes from the plastic manufacturers themselves. So as you probably know, there has been a significant backlash against bottled water in the last couple of years on college campuses, among communities of faith. The media has paid a lot of attention to this, and dozens and dozens of U.S. cities have quit spending taxpayer money on bottled water. But the issue that's been getting the most traction, I think we owe it's gotten so much attention, is about not water, but about carbon. Specifically, the amount of oil it takes to make the bottles we go through, which is the equivalent of 17 million barrels of oil a year to make the bottles, and making them generates 2.5 million tons of carbon dioxide. If you add up all the oil it takes to pump water from the source, bring it back to a bottling plant, run these machines, send the bottles out to distribution centers or big box stores, and then send trucks around to pick up all the empties, that's the equivalent of filling each bottle of water almost 1/5 of the way up with oil. And that's a calculation that was laboriously done by the nonpartisan think tank, the Pacific Institute in California. But there's also been a lot of pushback organized by some pressure groups around how a lot of this water is collected from small springs in tiny towns that happen to have good water. Which brings us to the important question of ownership of groundwater. In the United States, surface water is part of the commons. It's part of the public trust. The laws concerning groundwater are different all over the country. In many places, the person who owns or leases the land can pump as much groundwater as they want, which is why we've gotten into trouble in a lot of towns with depleting springs and these large corporations coming in. And I write about in the Bottle Mania the source of Poland spring water. Poland Spring is the most popular spring water brand in New York. You see it everywhere. And I focused on one of the sources, Dryburn, Maine. And Poland Spring is owned by Nestle, which also owns Arrowhead and Calistoga and Zephyrhills and Ozarka and Deer Park and Ice Mountain, Perrier, Pellegrino. They're the largest water merchant in the world. And so we see in this town, as I read about, that it's very easy to lose control of the democratic process when a large company comes into a small area. Bottled water may seem like a fairly trivial matter, but we're talking here about a resource that is finite. And I think that people forget this. That 75% of the planet is covered by water, but only 3% of our water is fresh water. And of that 3%, only 1% is readily available. And the rest is locked up in snowfields and in ice caps. So So for the last 4.5 billion years on this planet, we've had the same amount of fresh water cycling over and through the hydrologic cycle, which has been fine most of the time for most people. The problem is that the population is going up very quickly, and climate change is making dry places much drier and wet places perversely much wetter, which sounds like it would be a great thing for water systems, but in fact, these large, intense storms rush pollutants into waterways, they overwhelm treatment plants, and they blow out infrastructure. So that there's now less fresh water available to each person on Earth. Between 1950 and 2009, as the population went from 2.5 billion up to 6.8 billion, global renewable water supplies per person declined by 63%. The population is projected to go up to 8 billion by 2025, at which point available water supply is going to drop by an additional 15% per person. When we have a much higher potential for water conflict now. As clean water becomes scarce worldwide, it's going to become more valuable everywhere. And as that day approaches, the people who live in this little town in Freiburg that I wrote about, as well as people in the Great Lakes Basin and in Washington and Oregon and in California and Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Colorado, these are all places that Nestle has pursued spring water, are asking themselves, whose hand do you want on the tap? Do you want your water to be in the hands of those who live in the watershed and depend on it for their survival? Do you want to sell your water rights to a corporation that moves that water away for the most part and answers mostly to its shareholders? So here's the take-home message from my book. Don't drink bottled water for bad reasons. Learn where your water comes from and what's going on upstream in the watershed in terms of development and industry and agriculture. Read that water quality report from your utility, and then do further testing at the tap, because the utility is responsible for water quality only up until your connection runs. You need to do testing at your tap to find out what's going on with the pipes in your house, or your water tank on your apartment building, and also think about your personal health situation, whether you're pregnant or nursing or have a frail immune system, and talk to your doctor if you have questions about drinking tap water. If you do this research and you find that there are contaminants of concern in your water, do a little more research, get a good filter. There's lots of sites that can direct you to filters that fit your water situation, your health situation, and your personal use situation. And I aggregate them on my website, which is bottlemania.net. So get yourself a good filter, get a good reusable bottle, one that's easy to clean and you're happy to bring with you. And remember to bring it with you when you leave your house with your keys and your reusable bag. And fill it when you're out and about at fountains and at shops and cafes. I do this all the time. No one has ever refused to fill my bottle for me, and it's usually a fairly pleasant exchange. But we need to fight. We're protecting ourselves with the filter in the bottle, but we have to fight to, we have to work on solutions to water problems also. We need to tighten and enforce the Clean Water Act. We need to more closely regulate CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, big farms that are polluting water with drugs and hormones. We need to pressure our leaders and pharmaceutical companies to organize take-back programs for pharmaceuticals. And we need to support our local watershed groups, which are fighting development and sprawl, and they're fighting gas drilling in our watershed. These groups need our money, they need our labor, they do stream cleanups and restoration work, and it's fun work, it's good exercise, and it will personally connect you to the place where you live. I want to make clear that I don't think that bottled water is the worst thing in the world. Other consumer products have a higher environmental footprint, but other consumer products don't flow from our taps. And I think that bottled water's social and political impacts could range farther than the environmental impacts, because if we continue to move toward privately bottled water, we might find that there's little political or financial support for municipal water systems. People who drink only bottled water may be reluctant, and when I reported this book, 1 in 5 Americans did drink only bottled water. But those people may be reluctant to support the rate increases or the bond issues that go toward watershed protection, toward upgrading our treatment plants so that we can remove some of these contaminants we continue to find at very low levels, and to fix our crumbling infrastructure. And we really need help with that. There's about 250,000 water main breaks a year in this country. Every time a pipe breaks, we get a boil water order, and people usually buy water instead of boiling it, and they lose a little bit of faith in their system.